New York, always fun to see. All right, seems to be leveling off, so I think we can dive in. For those of you who I've not had the pleasure of speaking to before, my name's Evan. I head up the commercial team for BuzzSumo. We are very excited to be joined here today by Domenica and Beth from Journey Further for a really cool, again, very topical, based in the audience, talk about earning digital PR links globally, thinking global, acting locally in both the US and the UK. They have a lot of experience in this space. They're probably some of the best people available to talk about it. So really excited for what they have in store for you. But we're going to take a second to talk about what BuzzSumo is, what BuzzSumo does, because some of you may be less familiar. So at BuzzSumo, we are your all-in-one PR and creative content solution. So our goal with BuzzSumo, I should say, BuzzSumo starts with data. We have some of the best data in the industry as far as finding new content and giving you all this cool context. But our goal is never to just hand you data and say, you know what, become a part-time data analyst. No, that's not what we want to do. We want to help you do your job better, help you do your job faster, and focus on the important things. So BuzzSumo is all about saving you time and helping you speed up what you do and giving you some really powerful insights. So if you're manually going out there and trying to build audience profiles and build a content strategy, we can analyze. We have trillions of data points. You can analyze millions of data points, billions of data points at a time, even tens of thousands, to give you a strategy to reach that audience. What type of content is going to work with them to get the most engagement? What type of tonality should you have? We're going to help you answer those questions. You don't have to do all this guesswork. You can just go in and understand your audience and get back to creating great content. For the PR pros, that's where we're focusing today. We have immensely powerful media monitoring tool. We're going to find all those mentions for you, making them really quick and easy for you to analyze them, understand their impact, create those alerts. We have a beautiful new journalist database. So we're going to find all the journalists you're going to want to outreach to, give you the contact information. As of this morning, so a little bit of a launch announcement too, we have a cool, powerful new AI-based journalist outreach tool to help you build those connections with journalists. And we can do a whole lot more. So if you have not tried BuzzSumo, give it a shot. I said we talk about our G2 reviews over here, but we have some great feedback from people in the industry as well, which is something we really love to see. These are mostly unsolicited, which is the really fun part about it. So keep in mind, we offer a free 30-day trial. So if you have not tried BuzzSumo, go to buzzsumo.com, give that a shot. Before I hand it over to Domenica and Beth, just a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording this call. So in the next day or two, we will send out a recording of this call to anyone who signed up along with the deck. And we are going to make sure we save some time for Q&A at the end of the call. So if any questions, pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Try to put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. We'll try to catch the ones in chat. It's easier to keep track of the ones in the Q&A box. We'll make sure we save some time to get through as many of those as we can at the end of the call. All right, I'll turn over to you guys.
Cool, thanks. I'm going to be sharing my screen. So Beth, if you need me to change the slide, just let me know, because all right,
I will.
and then view slideshow. Everyone sees all right?
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. All right, let's get to it.
Thanks, Domenica. I may have to turn my camera off because I'm having some internet issues. I'm so sorry. It's happening at the worst possible time. But hi, I'm Beth. I'm the VP of Organic Media at Journey Further. Got over 12 years experience leading our UK and US team to drive organic performance and brand awareness for a lot of global and leading brands, including likes of Pretty Little Thing and St. Moritz. So really excited to be here. I've included our, can't really say Twitter anymore, but X handles at the bottom. We'd love it if you could share your feedback, share your thoughts as we go. So there are our Twitter handles if you'd like to follow us.
Cool. And I'm Domenica DiTivio. I've been working in digital PR, content marketing my entire career. I've worked for clients ranging from small businesses to Fortune 500s. I've outreached a lot in the UK, but of course, almost entirely in the US. So I have a lot of experience in kind of what we're talking about today. And definitely let us know if we don't get to your questions today. You can just send us a DM on Twitter, and we're happy to answer anything that may have been left behind. And thank you so much for being here. I will say that I've been using BuzzSumo on a daily basis, probably for the last 8 years, well before the media database thing that just recently launched for us. BuzzSumo was a hugely important tool in my career for what we do. And if you don't use it, I definitely recommend you use it. I think our team uses it every day, at least. Like, they're spending hours in that tool. So it just provides loads of really interesting and valuable data to help inform your strategy. So definitely check it out. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to tee it up by talking about some of the challenges that we're seeing in 2023 with digital PR and some feedback from some people on Twitter. We're going to go into the US and UK media landscapes. Nothing that isn't publicly available knowledge, but some insight that we can provide into how we can inform our PR strategy based on this media landscape. We're going to talk about some of the solutions, what can we do navigating the differences between both regions, how you can optimize your big, large global campaigns and make efficiencies so that you can launch one campaign in both territories and mitigate as much risk as possible and also be as successful as possible. And then we're going to get into some of the KPIs that we measure ourselves by and our clients measure us by, and what's really important and what the main message is behind those KPIs. So let's start it. Let's get started with the challenges. So in a very scientific poll 2 days ago, I asked Twitter, is digital PR earning coverage or links harder in 2023 than it has in years past? I can tell you my opinion on this is absolutely it is. Long gone are the days where you can just sort of send a few emails and go viral, right? We used to love to do that. It's not as easy to do that anymore. And maybe you don't even want to do that anymore, depending on your strategy. About 75% of you, so 157 people voted, about 75% of people said, yes, it is harder. Some people here said, no, it's about the same, okay. And 2.5% said it's easier. Well, if you are one of those 2.5%, please hit me up. I would love to chat to you and ask you why you think it's easier. And maybe you should be hosting this webinar and you can tell us why you think it's easier, because I don't think most people agree with that. But yeah, I think overall the consensus is getting harder. So why is it getting harder? Some of this are answers to this question that I posed on Twitter a few days ago, and some of it is some tweets that I picked up when I was searching for what people are talking about when it comes to the challenges. So we have Jess saying that a big challenge is affiliate marketing taking over. We're definitely seeing that. We're definitely seeing that journalists, you want to earn revenue for their publisher, and so they're wanting to ensure that their coverage includes affiliate links to drive some of that revenue. We're seeing the geographic spread of the population means that the USA has like way more opportunities when you're thinking about local coverage. From Ryan, that's fairly true. From Alice, longer wait time on the articles, absolutely 100% true. It can often take an hour for UK journalists to cover a story, and it takes us several days, sometimes weeks. You're waiting for coverage, but it's worth it in the end. The political landscape she mentions. We have Rebecca and Jocelyn mentioning that there's some layoffs, there's some mergers, there's staff redundancies. All of that plays a huge part in why we are facing a challenging digital PR landscape in 2023 and beyond.
Thanks, Domenica. So in the UK, it's quite a similar story. As Erica said, a lot of us are experiencing out of offices at the moment, which is likely to just get worse over the next few weeks, especially with school holidays. We're fighting against AI content, and then we're seeing drops in regional journalists as well due to redundancies. That was from Mary, as well as, of course, the dreaded affiliate links. So yeah, there's a lot of overlaps here, which is interesting. And then another issue to contend with is that the ratio of PRs to journalists is forever growing. And this is the same throughout. So throughout both territories. In the UK, over the past few years, the number of PRs to journalists has increased, meaning there's a lot of competition and journalists' inboxes are busier than ever, which means we as PRs have to work even harder to capture their attention and get cut through.
So a similar story in the US, according to BLS data, that's Bureau of Labor Statistics, PR professionals outnumber journalists around 6 to 1. And you will see if I flip back to the UK slide where it says, oh no, what did I do? Can I flip back? Yeah, it will say there's 110,000 journalists in the UK. And then you'll see that it says 44,000 journalists in the US. So you want to take this data a little bit with a grain of salt. What I suspect is happening with the BLS data is that they're lumping journalists as one thing, maybe media professionals as another, maybe content creators and content journalists as another thing. But I want to draw your attention to how low this number is and really drive in the point. I think if you're coming from the UK, you know how massive America is, and you say, yeah, there's loads more opportunities. There's X 1000% more media opportunities for you and your brand. I will lightly push back on that and say, due to some of the slides that I'm going to present and then in a little bit, that might not actually be true. I think when you're thinking about domains and properties, yes, there are 1000% X more opportunities. When you're thinking about, is there a person at their desk writing for these properties, and can I outreach that person? You're going to find that there's a lot of doubling down, efficiencies being made at these news houses. You'll find there's not that many people actually to contact that you think. So while 44,000 journalists is probably misleading, I wouldn't go on to say there are, X 1000% more media opportunities, because in my experience, the last 8 years, it's just not true. So we're going to go in and talk about the US and UK media landscape and get into why I think that is. So we'll talk a little bit about ownership in politics. This is kind of what it looked like. So what it looks like right now. If you're thinking about 40 years ago, there were 50 companies in charge of most of the media in America. What you have now is 6 companies in charge of most of the media in America. So what does that mean? That means making more efficiencies. That means sharing content among these properties. So a journalist article is getting syndicated now a lot more than it ever used to. And you're also seeing, writers writing for multiple publishers. You're seeing AI content being really, really heavily used, especially now. And essentially, you're seeing a lot of these sites have the same content distributed across all the platforms. I wanted to dive into Hearst Communication as an example. So you have Hearst, who owns Cosmo and Elle, and they own Elle Decor, and they own Good Housekeeping, and then they own House Beautiful. And that's why when you go into find and you're pitching a campaign and you want to target somebody at Good Housekeeping and you say, oh my God, this is the best writer, it's a perfect fit. And you go and you click on them, and then you discover that they write for another publisher within the same umbrella. So they're sharing their resources, okay? Which is why I think there is a challenge that's presented. It's also an opportunity that's presented as well. If you're working towards more brand awareness for your clients, tapping into these syndication networks is extremely powerful. So just to go on to show, they're also owning, obviously, television networks, cable networks. The same content's being shared throughout all of these properties. And this slide is a little scary, it's a little busy, but we have to talk about it. If we didn't talk about it, then it wouldn't be showing me the fair picture. So you have, America is exceptional in the nature of its political divide, which means that you'd be shocked to find, you say, Domenica, what I'm pitching on behalf of my client, I have a client that sells shoes. How on earth can this be political, or whatever it is? You'd be surprised on how we can make something very seemingly innocent political in this country. And so it's something you want to be aware of, and you want to be aware of the nuances that exist, which is why I pulled out Florida. Both of these charts, by the way, are from the New York Times. If you are curious about the demographics of different states, you can go over there and check it out. But if you're looking at Florida, is historically a swing state, right? Florida's politics are very in the news lately. So you might think that many people from Florida have the same views as the governor there. But in fact, there are a handful of counties in Florida that always vote blue, and they're highly populated counties. And so they're not showing really the whole picture. It appears that Florida is mostly red, but where all the people are living, many of them are living in these blue counties. What you're pitching on a local level, so if you're trying to get and tap into that local opportunity when you're outreaching in America, just be aware of what's going on in that state, but in those counties as well, and who your audience is. Who is your client's audience? Are they living in these areas at all? Is it even worth your time? Or what angle are you going to take? There's a couple of examples here about how politics can really affect your brand image and even your revenue. You have Anheuser-Busch lost $5 billion because they partnered with an influencer. And it's a crazy, crazy story. And then you have also Unilever losing about $2 billion in value because of a tweet that one of the founders of Ben and Jerry's sent out. So on both sides of the spectrum, you just want to be very careful when you're working on behalf of your client or brand, what message you're going out and who you're going out with it. And you're talking about the political divide. You're also talking about bias in media. This chart is from All Sides Media Bias Ratings, but if you want to learn more about what publishers you're outreaching and what their bias is, and you can't really tell, especially those left of center or right of center publishers, or maybe even the center publishers, you're not sure quite what their political angle is. They have these charts available. They're pretty scientific in how they're analyzed, and you can download them. One of them is called the Ad Fontes Media Chart. You want to know who you're outreaching. Your clients want to appear on certain publishers over others. I think it's really important to have an awareness of this. What I will say is that my team, like we've worked for more political campaigns, like more politically aligned campaigns in the past. And if you're smart and strategic, you're able to place the same piece of content. You're able to place it on CNN on the far left, but also able to place it on Fox, right? So depending on how you outreach, if you're really strategic about it, you pull out certain data points or you highlight certain things, you're able to get coverage and links for your clients across the spectrum of news publishers.
Thanks, Domenica. I'm going to try keeping my camera on, but if I have problems, will you let me know? I'll turn it off if you can't hear me. So since working really closely with Domenica and learning about the political landscape in the US, it really made me consider, well, how much do we need to consider it in the UK? So I asked this question to Twitter to get everyone else's opinions. So on the next slide, I think it was interesting, and I wasn't surprised to see that the majority of UK-based PRs, I mean, it was a very small sample size, you can see 69 votes, but they don't tend to consider a publication's political agenda when pitching. And I thought this was quite interesting because arguably we should be, because as you can see, there's quite some big differences. And for me personally, previously I've just considered ethics more than politics. So for example, we always ask clients, are there any publications that you don't want us to be featured, that you don't want to be featured in? And if there is, more often it's usually the Sun or the Daily Mail that they want to avoid. And it seems less to do with politics and more to do with like morally how they report on the news. But depending on the client you're representing, the tone and messaging of your story really does matter. So this is another reason why it's important to take a personalized approach rather than just blast out one pitch to hundreds of journalists, because different publications will cover a story slightly differently. And I do think that in order to give your pitch the best chance of success, it's really important that we actually consider this at ideation and validation stage. Especially if your client has highlighted a certain publication as a key title for them. And I think as a bit of a risk assessment, especially if you're reaching out to the likes of the Sun or the Daily Mail, it's always worth considering how they've covered similar brands or topics before, just to ensure that that framing is the right fit. So that's political agenda, but then what about ownership? Because again, I think Domenica makes a really interesting point, and it's actually quite similar to the US. So we just have a few companies that actually have a monopoly over all national newspapers. So you can see here that DMG Media owns 38%, Daily Mail, Metro, Mail on Sunday, and iNews. And that might be a surprise to some of you guys, but I've been to the offices in London and I've just seen that they're all in the same office. And that's why, because they own all of them. So yeah, the Metro and iNews is actually owned by the same people who also run the Daily Mail, which may be a surprise for some of you. But again, I don't think that ownership has as much of an impact as it does in the US, but I think it should be something that we do talk about and we do consider. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. And if it's something that you've ever taken into consideration, if you want to share in the comments from a UK perspective, because this is something that Domenica has really opened my eyes about.
I'm really sorry, Beth. I'm like going completely rogue with the deck, but just bear with me.
Is my audio okay?
Yeah, you're doing great. I can hear everything.
Okay, fab.
Right. So let's talk about some of the solutions. So we talked about the challenges. So what is working, and how can we tackle some of these challenges in both territories, unique to both territories, and then of course some things are consistent across.
Yeah, so there are, as you can tell, and everyone I know who's on this webinar is probably understanding of them, that there is a lot of challenges. But the good news is that coverage and links is still possible with the right approach across both territories. So I couldn't do a digital PR webinar without mentioning my favorite topic, which for those who know me and follow me is, of course, taking a relevance-led approach. So I've spoken a lot in the past about the importance of focusing your outreach content and your campaign content around the keywords that you want to rank for, due to Google's use of natural language understanding and its ability to read content. However, that's only one part of creating a relevant campaign. There are 3 other areas that you need to consider, regardless of what territory that you're working in. So as well as ensuring that your campaign is topically relevant to the keywords you want to, you want to rank for, you also need to ensure your content is relevant to your target audience. So do you have data and insight that shows that your target market is going to want to read and engage with that content? Is the topic something that your brand, it's relevant to what you sell or the services that you offer? Do you have the authority to really own that topic? And of course, cultural relevance. We need to make sure that we're talking about content that's timely. Trends are changing so quickly. You can see on TikTok every day there's a new trend. So it's important that we're creating content that's timely and topical, because journalists in an ideal world want to write about what's actually trending tomorrow, not today or yesterday. So my main takeaway here is create relevant content that appeals to your target audience, but also meets the expectations of search engines. So what is link-worthy? So what is link-worthy, high-quality, relevant content in 2023? So journalists are only going to add a link if it offers their reader something. There has to be a purpose. And so therefore you need to be making sure that the content you're creating is informational, inspirational, educational, and entertaining. And if you can include all of these 4 factors in your content, then that's already a quite basic recipe for success. But something that I think you really need to consider is that journalists really care about their KPIs as well. So I just wanted to share with you some journalist insight that I thought was quite interesting, because it's always useful to hear from them. So as I was saying, Rachel came out and tweeted last year that she's not interested in a story unless it's doing big clicks. So journalists really care about their SEO too. They want to be writing stories that when you click in the news on Google search, that their stories are coming up first, because then they'll get more clicks, they'll get more traffic, and then they can sell more advertising revenue off the back of that, because ultimately that's how they make money. And from speaking with journalists, we know that they're KPI'd on those metrics too. So we need to really be considerate of their metrics when pitching a story. And also, we've just recently had this feedback from a journalist, which I thought I would share with you, that actually said Google data can actually be a bit of a turn-off. And I know Google data has been a tried and tested metric for quite some time now. It's something that Jennifer, that we've had a lot of success with. So it's a bit disappointing to hear this. But I think when you stop and think about it, it's not actually that surprising, because if you've got hundreds, thousands of PRs constantly pitching Google trend stories all the time, then journalists are going to start doubting the authenticity of it, because not everything can be a trend, right? So I'd say here, it's always best to try and use your own content or your own data to at least back that up. So are you seeing like a spike in sales? Are you seeing a spike in certain internal searches on your website that you can share instead? Because that's something that's unique to you. And also it's a little bit easier to then request a link back if it's data that you actually own. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
So I wanted to jump in here and just add a little bit to Beth's note about the metrics that journalists care about. I have to be completely crystal clear, especially knowing that journalists are being promoted, given raises hired and fired based on their engagement metrics, right? Their time on page, how much revenue they drive through affiliate links, how many clicks they get, how many engagement get. What is the story that they came out with? Is it talkable? Are people sharing it on social media? Are people talking about it? So I did find like a study to back this up, and now I realize I haven't linked the source, so I will link the source later on if anyone wants to know more. And it's all about how these metrics that journalists are being held to are actually impacting journalism in the United States and impacting the headlines. What does this mean for PRs? Well, it means, you know, first of all, the ethical responsibility that we have when coming out with data stories, that our data is statistically significant as much as it can be, that we have adequate sample sizes, that the surveys don't ask, you know, when we're asking survey questions, we're not asking leading questions. All of the survey methods, best practices, you want to take that into account, especially because you're outreaching on behalf of a brand and you're creating campaigns on behalf of the brand. So you really, really want to make sure that the data is authoritative. But beyond that, if you want to earn journalist coverage in 2023, your data needs to say something that they don't already know, that their audience doesn't already know, and that their audience is going to go, oh my God, this is brand new to me and this is worth sharing. So it's got to be surprising. It has to be new. It has to be owned, right? And just be careful, you know, data is not valuable in and of itself. What is the data saying? That's kind of just me driving home, you know, if you want to do what does the journalist want? They want to do well in work, and they want to meet their KPIs for the month, unfortunately. So make sure that what you're pitching is all of those things that Beth had said in the previous slide.
Thanks, Domenica. I've turned my video off for a little bit because I'm getting a message saying it's unstable, so apologies again. So with the rise of AI, journalists want real experts and case studies to provide trustworthy and authentic content. So this is another trend that we're seeing at Journey Further and something that we wanted to share with you. So just on to the next slide. This is just some examples of some recent coverage, and we love to position our clients as experts in order to secure high authority links and coverage. If needed, we will also partner with third-party experts to act as our client's spokesperson or ambassador if they are better placed. So for example, here you can see with Time for Sleep, we've teamed up with a sleep expert to make sure that we're really providing that high authority and genuine experts, as opposed to just quoting, you know, the business owner or the marketing manager. And because we do see a lot more success when there's an actual expert quoted. And I think with the rise of AI, where, you know, people can just be putting content into, well, asking ChatGPT questions and getting comments, we need to really fight against that. So it's definitely worth the investment, because obviously teaming up with experts can come at a cost. But actually, if you're also able to use their content for on-site content as well, taking into consideration Google's EAT guidelines, then it's definitely beneficial. So we are seeing that third-party experts are really cutting through some of that noise, which is great. And also, having said that, we can still use AI to embrace, we should embrace it to allow us to test new campaign formats that haven't been done before. So we've recently tested some AI campaigns and they've gone really well for us. So this one is on the left is for Ginger Ale, who specialise in baby shower decorations. So we asked AI for baby name predictions by feeding it. We worked with ChatGPT and we fed it historical data. And then for Sports Direct, footwear is a big focus for them, one of their keywords that we need to try and improve rankings for. We partnered with futurist Tom Cheesewright, who predicted how our feet could change in 100 years and what trainers future humans would then be walking in as a result. So it's interesting because I think we can use AI to experiment and we can potentially create content quite easily, which means that, you know, we can deliver more on tighter budgets, and also they shouldn't take as long to do as well. I know there's lots of tried and tested campaign formats in digital PR world, but I think if we are brave and we can use AI to experiment, it should be a lot less time consuming than some of the previous campaign formats we've used in the past. So I just wanted to say that whilst we need to be careful of AI, we can definitely use it for the good.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things though too is just to be careful with AI, as Beth has said. I think that its uses is innumerable, and it's going to change everything, and we should embrace it for the most part. And I think there's a resource, I retweeted it a while back, but I think Iona Townsley wrote a blog post about uses of AI in digital PR. So you should definitely check that out. One of the things I would be careful about is using AI without adding a human element to it when it comes to building relations with journalists, when it comes to one-to-one outreach. Here's the thing. I've tested now in the last like 3 months, I've tested like 5 different AI outreach tools, and each one of them failed my test of, okay, let's see the list that it spits out and let me check this list. And, you know, some are better than others in many cases, and that's great. And we're going to use those tools in our outreach. But if you don't check who you're going to send this email to and you blanket send this email, you're just as bad as the people who are programming AI bots to do it on their behalf. You have to check your media lists. One of the things is kind of like a prickly subject. I think people don't like to, I haven't gotten a lot of positive feedback about this opinion, but everybody I know in the US takes this approach. So it's just something to consider if you're trying to expand the US. This one-to-one outreach, very high touch, very personalized outreach is the way to go, especially if you're going to be working in a niche over a long period of time. If you're going to be working in tech for the foreseeable future and you work on tech clients, taking that one-to-one approach in that first year or so, it's going to be time consuming. You're going to wonder if there's return, but then years later, you're going to be thankful because you've built, you know, a Rolodex of contacts that you can rely on to bounce ideas off of, that you can rely on to earn coverage for your clients, not just that original client you started out with, but all of the other tech clients that you've gained since then. These are screenshots from journalists. I searched Twitter, I think, for PR fail, which, you know, whatever. They're all saying the same thing. Check what I write. Make sure it's relevant to me, Make sure it's relevant to me. Make sure it's what I cover. It's so simple. But the fact that they have to tweet this demonstrates that we are not, as an industry, participating in best practices. And if you want to compete, right, I saw a statistic today, 97% of PR emails go unreplied to. Now, our response rate doing this one-to-one outreach is way higher than 3%. Our response rate is way higher because we send one-to-one email outreach. If you want to know how a journalist wants to be pitched, it's not, one size does not fit all, unfortunately. I can tell you how do American journalists want to be pitched. It's only a piece of the puzzle. You can search the journalists on Twitter and see what they've said about PR pros and PR pitches and use that to inform how you outreach them. You can search them on the One Pitch blog. There's a Coffee with a Journalist blog. They've interviewed hundreds of journalists. It's a great resource. See if they've been interviewed on We Earn Media podcast. There's loads of resources like that where journalists tell you how they want to be pitched. If you use Muckrack, there's a little bar right next to their name that tells you what they like to see and what they don't. Use all of these things to your advantage when you're outreaching, and you're going to be really successful. Change your subject line to match the headline of their articles. Ensure that just because they're a fashion writer and you're pitching a fashion story, ensure that the type of story you're pitching, they covered that, or they have covered that in the past. It's not enough that they're a fashion writer, that you send them a fashion piece. That's not enough personalization in my experience. These kind of relationships get built over time, but they pay dividends, and you end up doing less work later down the line because of this one-to-one approach. Not to mention, if you're an agency, if you're working in an agency, you're pitching on behalf of the brands that, you know, these brands that pay you a lot of money to do this. Ensure that you're sending emails on their behalf that they would be proud of and that represent the brand the best way. Want to demonstrate how this works? You know, I could have shown you our internal data or statistics, but I thought these screenshots tell a better story. So this was a week or two ago. Our intern started with us, Samuel. He's amazing. We love him. He started with us for the summer, and we put him on, you know, we gave him a client campaign that he was helping someone else out as a trial. And we said, okay, build a list. And we checked his list and we gave him feedback, and we checked his list and gave him feedback over and over. Okay, write a pitch. Okay, we gave feedback over and over. He was all ready to send his first pitch based on all of our personalization best practices. This pitch was so unique to this writer There was no way that he could have possibly repurposed it for any other writer. And that's kind of how you want to be outreaching, or how we like to be outreaching. So he went and sent that email. We were so excited. Congratulations, Samuel. You sent your first email. That's amazing. Within an hour, the writer goes, oh yeah, I'd love to cover this. Thank you so much. I mean, that was remarkable. And I said, oh my God, 100% response rate, 100% interest rate. We were so excited. And then not only that, that response turned into a piece of coverage the next day, 24 hours later. He got his first placement. I have never seen that in real life before, but it does go and show that this approach really works, and this kind of training regimen really, really works as well. Like, I don't know if anyone has a similar story, please share, but well done, Samuel. Like, huge shout out to him, but also to show you that you take this approach, you're going to be really successful. And I'm just super proud of him and having him on the team for the summer. What happens when you nurture these relationships? So what happens if Samuel, continues to work with us, and then in the next few months, he has another campaign that's similar to that? Well, what you can do is you can start to bounce your ideas before you jump in both feet first, before you create big campaigns, before you spend millions of dollars and loads of time on your campaigns. You can ask a journalist, hey, what do you think about this idea? That's really another huge power of building relationships this way. They will want to help you because you've provided them something useful and interesting to their audience. And you've also taken the time to get to know them and what they cover and what their audience covers. We often mitigate risk, especially on a global scale, before we launch a campaign, because we don't want to have to go back to the drawing board. So it's an extra step in the beginning, but the theme of the day is pay dividends down the line. We learn all about what they like about a campaign or an idea, how they would like, they think that we can improve it. What do you think the strongest headline is, right? And it's a great way. So you start building relationships with journalists, you start to ask them and mitigate some of that risk. Beth, I think you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Domenica. That was great. Samuel's on this, listening in, so he's I think he's blushing now with all your lovely feedback. He's sent you a message. Amazing. So then, how to then take all of this into one global approach? So we work with a lot of brands across 2 territories, and there's obviously lots of differences that we need to navigate. But the good news is that it is still possible to come up with one campaign concept that is going to resonate across both. But don't jump in with both feet first and jump straight to execution. It's really important to really understand and identify the global opportunity first. So we know that brands grow by being consistent and distinctive. So it's important you keep your brand messaging and tone across every territory that you're working in order to continue to build on your global brand presence. But in terms of looking into insight, these are some things that we always consider before we start ideating and putting a strategy together. But I just wanted to focus on the top 3. So it's really important to understand, what's the brand's key messages, what's their proposition, what's the tone of voice, because that needs to make sure that that runs across through the whole concept and is laddered up through all the messaging that you're going to be putting out. But it's important to really understand your customers' audiences and the personas. So where are the overlaps? So if you've got an audience in the UK and an audience in the US, you might have like a fashion brand or a beauty brand, and it could be that both audiences, Christmas party season is really big for both. So it's like young females, for example, say if it was a beauty brand. So that's instantly insight that is going to be the same across 2 territories. So what I would really urge you to do is identify, where are those overlaps, because that will help you with efficiencies. And then the idea is that you then come up with a campaign, like an umbrella concept that then can be tweaked to make sure that, the outreach materials and the language that you're using and the tone is relevant to the different territories, but also on a more micro level as well, because obviously in America it's huge. As Domenica was saying before, you've got to consider the different states and the local journalists as well as the national journalists. And it's also similar to an extent in the UK as well, like thinking about those regional nuances and what you can and can't be talking about. So this is just some insight for you to use when you're putting together your next global campaign, and hopefully it's helpful.
So, here's one thing though too as well. You want to create these global campaigns with consistent messaging. Of course you do, but you don't want to do it at the expense of local markets. And so it was really funny when Beth and I were putting this together, because we did it asynchronously, obviously with the time zones. Although Beth is joining me in New York in like a month forever, which is really exciting. So we were putting this together, and I actually messaged her and I go, there is no way that Pancake Day is like a real thing. And I was like, you sure it's not just like an awareness day? Like, it's like, and she was like cracking up. Apparently it's a big deal. This is really important to have feet on the ground in both territories, because there are things that you are just not going to know. You're just not going to know about. And I think Beth was with me in the office when our CEO, Robin, I was going out to get a coffee, and he asked me to go get him a flapjack. And a flapjack is not the same thing. And I was like, no way. Do you want me to get a flapjack? A flapjack is a pancake in America, right? And so it's just really, really interesting. And we learn more and more language differences each and every day. But anyway, the point of the slide, don't sacrifice don't just work on one global campaign without adapting to the local markets and what's going on with your audience locally.
I was going to say as well, I'd never heard of pickleball until I was in a brainstorm with Domenica and the US team as well. You can tell who put this slide together because you've put fall instead of autumn. But yeah, it's a constant conversation that we have, which is it's fun. You don't really celebrate bonfire night either, do you? Which I suppose is a very British thing, being Guy Fawkes and Parliament. So yeah, it's just good to know and good to be aware of that some things will resonate and some things really won't.
Yeah, for sure. I just seen in the chat that Stephen goes, wait until the UK learns about our biscuits. So
oh no, we know about the biscuits.
We would ask on our hiring, what's your favorite biscuit in the UK? It's like a fun thing. And so when we launched in the US and we were hiring in the US, all of our applicants were like, the responses we got about biscuits in America were so funny. People were saying, some people just said, what? Like, what kind of question is that? They were like, refused to answer it. And then other people were like, sausage and gravy. Which I was like dying laughing, so funny. But definitely huge cultural nuances that you need to take into consideration.
And I think on that point, it's exactly why we have our American team. We have boots on the ground. We have you guys as specialists because you live and breathe it. And as much as we can try and learn in the UK, it's not the same as having you who've grown up in America and all of these things. And it's really important that we continue to have these conversations because it does make a big difference. We could quite easily make a fool of ourselves if not.
100%.
Cool. And then we just wanted to end on I guess an example of it's massive at the moment, one global strategy that's going well, which is Barbie versus Oppenheimer. I'm going to see Barbie tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. And it's something that Domenica and I joke about because Domenica likes to wear a lot of black and I like to wear a lot of pink. I don't know if you saw our promo video, but we sort of drew on this. So I wanted to make sure that we mentioned it. But I think it's fair to say that this is an example of something that's resonated the same globally. So, Barbenheimer has been, a sellout in America, and it has in the UK as well. More people are going to the cinema to watch films back to back than they ever have. Well, they have done previously. And I know in America, my American colleagues are dressing up in pink to go and see Barbie. We're all dressing up in pink in the UK. So it sounds really basic, but this is just an example of where, there was like a common interest, a common insight. And so naturally it's doing well across both territories. So yeah, I couldn't not mention it, but I thought we were going to use one of our case studies, but that was a bit more interesting. And so then finally, we need to talk about like demonstrating the impact. And I think something I really wanted to touch on here is how a successful digital PR strategy can drive more than organic performance. So organic performance is, the main goal of digital PR. Our goal is to build those high quality, relevant backlinks to ensure that we're driving the authority. We know that Google sees links as a vote in order to drive search increases. So the higher that our organic rankings are, the more traffic we would expect. The more traffic, the more conversions, and then ultimately the more conversions, the more revenue. So, you know, those links all the way back at the beginning of the journey can make a really big difference in working in tandem with technical SEO. But if we, you know, taking everything we said about a relevant led approach, considering all the insight and making sure it's on brand, if we go about putting together a digital PR strategy the right way, we can also deliver against brand building metrics as well. So on the next slide, I'm quite passionate about this because I know there's you know, a lot of conversations between digital PR and traditional PR, and there are differences, but if executed correctly, I think you can still get brand building benefits from a digital PR strategy. So and this is especially important if, say, you're a UK brand and you're launching in the US, or you're a US brand and you're launching in the UK, because you don't just want to build the trust from a search engine perspective, but you need to build trust from, you know, your consumers, your customers who are going to buy from you. So by doing a really great digital PR campaign, you're going to be able to increase brand advocacy and trust. You're going to then increase brand salience. People are going to remember you, and you're going to be earning that attention authentically, as opposed to having to, you know, spend lots of money on paid media and pay for advertising. So I just wanted to touch on this because I do think we've got huge opportunities, digital PRs, to deliver not just organic performance, but also brand building as well. And so when we think about metrics and measuring the impact of everything that we do, I think it's really important to consider the micro metrics, but then also how they ladder up to the macro metrics, which ultimately is our clients' end goals. So it's thinking about, you know, the number of links and coverage, the DR of that publication, whether they've got the key messages in there, a link to products, obviously category page links are extremely valuable, any imagery. We have a tool that can measure relevancy, so we would include that as a macro metric. Social engagement and shares, so how much has people been engaging with it, and also like sentiment and brand positioning as well. You know, we want to make sure that we're creating positive brand stories. We don't want to just be putting stories out there just for the sake of it. We need to make sure that it's rooted with positive sentiment. And all of those ladder up to macro metrics, so things like measuring organic traffic growth, the transactions, the sales, how we've increased share of organic voice, and then revenue, and also how, you know, our targeted keywords rankings have improved. So I think it's important we talk a lot about links in this industry, but I think there's lots of other metrics that we can be focusing on, and I think we should always be pulling ourselves back to, well, why are we doing this? And that usually isn't just to necessarily get a link, but it's actually to drive organic growth. It's to drive organic rankings, to, you know, improve sales and revenue. And then I wasn't sure whether to end on this. I just put it in as a little bit of a personal case study, just to talk about the power of PR coverage, even if there's no link in here, and also to consider like the wider benefits of social media too. So some of you may have seen this story of a mum who wore a Primark nightie, which is, you know, Primark is a retailer in the UK, to a wedding. And my partner actually saw it on Facebook and sent it to me, and he was like, I think you'd love this dress. And I was like, oh my God, I need that dress. And I hadn't been to Primark for several years, but I went to Primark and I managed to grab the nightie. Now, did I click a link and pay for that online? No, because Primark doesn't sell online. Thank you, Eleanor. But let's not continue on this. Domenica, please change the slide. I guess the moral of the story was I was very much influenced by social media, by coverage, and so I went and bought the nightie to wear. Haven't actually dared to wear it out yet. I don't know yet. I might wait until I go on holiday, but I definitely need a spray tan as well. But that's just to end on the point of, yes, we need to be getting those links. Of course we do. But we should always be considering the other powers of PRs as well. Because I think if you get a really high powered product-led coverage, you know, naturally you're going to see an impact as a result of that. And I just thought it was a bit of a funny story to end on. So that's our webinar. It'd be great, I guess, to pass back to you guys at BuzzSumo, and then we've got a little bit of time, I think, for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I not just saying this, but I learned a lot and want to go back and watch the recording. There's a lot of really tactical, awesome things in there and strategies. And one cool thing is I think I noticed a lot of questions came in about how you pitch UK versus US journalists. And I think you really answered those in the slides, which was great. And the sense of how you look for local events like the start of pickleball season for the US, which everyone seems to be obsessed with, and I still haven't tried out. So I think it's really cool that you were able to share that. So for anyone else, if any questions, pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. While we're doing that too, we can share a little information. The next webinar we're going to be hosting. I'm not sure there's another slide to go to. There we go. Perfect. I love the background of the picture of me in this one. So I mentioned we're launching our journalist database and the outreach tool. We're really excited about it because I think one of the really cool things that ties into a little bit of what we talked about, or I should say what Beth and Domenica talked about today, is that you don't want to just send out random pitches to people. You need to make them something they're going to open and excite them. And a good way to do that is not only to have their contact information, but to know what topics they write about, to have a quick and easy way to see what they've written recently that you can maybe talk about. So BuzzSumo is going to help you know your journalists better so you can create better content and connect them better. So we're really excited about what we have in store for you guys in the next webinar. So make sure you sign up now. I'm going to be joined by Nate from our product team, maybe a few other surprise guests, and we'll make sure it's an exciting and informative webinar. So again, any questions, pop them in the Q&A box. We'll get to a few of these. One I think is pretty straightforward from Erica. I will try to answer this one, is what is pickleball? It's a game everyone seems to be obsessed with. It's like you play it on the front half of a tennis court. You hit like a wiffle ball, if that translates to the UK. I don't know if it does or not, like a plastic ball back and forth with a paddle tennis racket. So it's like low impact, but kind of fun looking. Again, I haven't tried it, and you can set it up on any like patch of concrete if you bring a net, which is why people like it. So that's the important question. What is pickleball? All right, we're seeing a few other questions trickle in. Let me scroll up and ask one I thought was kind of interesting. As you mentioned, Beth and Domenica, I'm not sure who mentioned this one, so apologies, but we talked about how it used to be really easy to reach out Google data, and more recently you gotten some pushback on that. Do you still find it useful to not lead in with Google data, but use that as verification that there's an audience for this content? So you have some cool stats or other attention grabbers and back it up and say, and on top of that, 20,000 people searched for this last month.
So yeah, just to clarify, I guess it's always important to caveat. That was just one journalist piece of feedback. So again, my sample size was quite small, but I did think it was interesting. And I think someone's asked for who that journalist was, and I will find out. Please message me on Twitter and I'll find out and confirm, because it was one of my team who raised it with me. It may have been a freelancer though. So yeah, I think that would be a good approach, to always back it up with as many data sources as you can. So it's like, not only are we seeing this on Google, but also this is backed up by our internal data as well. And it just gives it that more legitimacy. So yeah, I think that's fair. And as I said, this is the thing with journalists, especially when they tweet things out like that, we have to remember that is just one of their opinion. But I did think it was interesting, and especially when you consider if everyone is literally bombarding them with Google Translator said this, Google Translator said this, eventually they're going to say, well, what is actually trending on Google? Because according to all of these emails, it's absolutely everything.
Makes sense. Again, a lot of questions came in about differences between US and UK journalists. I think you talked a lot about the strategy. I think some people are curious about what they perceive, or maybe is the reality of a personality difference between UK folks and the US folks. And I work for a company that has a pretty big base in the H, and as you both do. So I know that there's a little bit of a divide sometimes culture-wise. Do you have different processes for UK and US journalists? Like, are you pushier with US journalists, but you think UK journalists might perceive that as rude? Do you have any differences in that approach?
I can take this one. So I also, I just saw a question come in from Megan that kind of is the same thing. So I think the UK and the US, from what I've heard from our UK team, is that the UK journalists maybe aren't as fussy about feeling like they're the only person that you emailed that campaign. US journalists want it to be very clear in your outreach email that email is for them and them alone, and which is why we go into such heavy effort personalizing the emails and making sure that we try to make a personal connection with the journalists, and we try to demonstrate how what we're doing and what we're sending them is going to help that journalist in their daily work. What that means, to Megan's question, is yes, our media lists in the US are very small, very highly targeted, and often very successful, like very high response rates, very high interest rates, and high placement rates, because we take so much time to send fewer emails that are really highly targeted. I don't know if that answers the full bulk of that question, but any follow-ups, let me know.
Perfect. All right, this one comes from Samuel. I think it sounds like you guys are familiar with. Do you find it more successful to personalize the pitch, talking about a recent article a journalist wrote in their bio, or a mix of both?
Oh, thanks, Samuel. We can talk about this more, Samuel, offline if you want, but yeah, both work. I would say that I like, if I can, find something a little personal. I like to switch it up, though. It really depends. Sometimes a journalist can be quite private. If they're quite private on their online footprint, then that means you really shouldn't try to take a leap and try to make a personal connection. They're private for a reason. So just keep it business and talk about their work and their audience and everything. But if they're very public and they have a huge social media presence on Twitter, they're always making you laugh, that's something you can mention for sure.
Cool. One that I think is teed up a little bit for BuzzSumo, so I'm going to ask it. Are there any tools you'd recommend to arm yourselves with knowledge of what resonates for different sectors in the US? The thing is written from a UK perspective, with example being a weather angle might be a good approach point in the UK because you're weather obsessed as a country, but less newsworthy for people stateside.
Any tools? So BuzzSumo is our favorite.
I was digging for that one, so thank you.
I'm not just saying that, but you'd be surprised on I would challenge you to go into BuzzSumo and really get used to the tools and really check out all of those different things that they can do, because that's what we use. I mean, we use that primarily. A couple of our other tools that we use for media outreach and monitoring, but it's all about varied sources. So we're looking at TikTok. We are looking at our TikTok trends tool. We have our own kind of like always on going on tool called Pulse that we use internally. It's a proprietary tool. We use BuzzSumo all the time, every day. Muckrack, Twitter, see what's trending. That's kind of the gist. But yeah, weather won't work as a topic in America. You have people in Buffalo shoveling 12 feet of snow at the same time. You have people in Miami sheltering down for a hurricane. So definitely stick to something else.
Yeah, we like the weather too, but it's a little different, a little less uniform here. Something Michelle asked, and I think it's a pretty quick one. I'm going to try to answer a little bit of from my perspective. Curious what you guys think too. What do you think about language, particularly spelling coming from the UK to the US? And I will say from my perspective, as someone in the US, when I started working with UK folks and I saw people spelling personalized with an S instead of a Z at the end, I thought it was a typo. The first couple of times, you're really just not exposed to it. Do you guys have a stance on using US versus UK language, or do you try to match who you're reaching out to?
I have a stance on it, but I'm tough. I've always been. So here's the thing. You're sending, this is your job. You're a media relations professional, you're a PR professional. If you have no choice but to adapt. If you're sending an American journalist an email, adapt to their language, because that's the best practice. So hold yourself to a really high standard and take the time to do stuff like that. I will say I have spelled a word wrong in a pitch to a US journalist, and it wasn't even an authoritative journalist. It wasn't even like a CNN writer. It was like an Ask Men writer. All right. I was pitching something about some sex study to him. I spelled a word wrong, and he came back to me and said, he was literally like, that's not spelled correctly. Like, just try to take care. I would say put in the effort. If you're going to go to such a crazy extent to personalize your emails and to do all these different things, change your subject line, change the language that you're outreaching in.
I fully agree with that. I think it goes back to, if you really are taking the time and you're personalizing your pitch, you should be personalizing the language that you use. And you use Google Docs, you can easily change the language to American English. It's or Grammarly, you can have the US version. It's kind of inexcusable.
That's a good point. There's a lot of tools these days to help with that. And all right, I think we're just hitting time. As much as we'd love to keep this going, there's a lot of great questions coming in. So I apologize we couldn't get to everything. But But what that tells you is there's so much great content in the presentation. So thank you so much for joining us, Beth and Domenica, and sharing everything. And for everyone in the audience, thank you for joining and listening in. We're really happy that you chose to spend some time with us today.
Yeah, thanks guys. If any of you want to reach out to us directly, if we haven't answered your question, then please do so, and we can chat about this offline.
Thanks so much, everyone. I've done a handful of webinars. I've never seen this much engagement. So I really appreciate you guys like chatting. It's so fun to see everything that you guys are writing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree to my part. The chat was popping off today. And we're going to make sure we send a recording, and also Beth and Domenica's contact information, a copy of the slides to you the next couple of days as well. So if you have any other questions, just reach out to us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.